Hey everyone, and welcome. So today we're diving deep into this idea of autonomy, but we're not going to talk about it like some fuzzy, abstract goal. We're going to look at it as a system, something you can actually build piece by piece, and we'll break it all down using 5 key tenets.
When we think about freedom, we often picture something with no rules, no constraints, just wide open space. But is that what it really is? A lack of structure can often just lead to chaos, a tangled mess. The big idea we're exploring today is that real, true freedom isn't about having no structure, it's about having the right structure, one that actually empowers you to move forward.
So if it's a discipline, a skill you can actually practice, that begs the question, right? How do you build it? How do you get there? Well, instead of just giving you a list of rules, let's watch how this plays out in the real world. Let's follow a story. Okay, so let's meet our main character. She's a talented graphic designer who's just moved to a brand new city for a big leadership role. She knows absolutely no one. Her life is, for all intents and purposes, a completely blank page. Now that sounds kind of romantic and exciting, but let's be real, it's mostly just overwhelming. We're going to see how she uses these 5 tenets to turn that blank page into a life she's actually designed on purpose.
First up, part 1 of the framework. This is all about getting your bearings. It's a 2-step move. First, you got to set your compass. Figure out where north is. And then you have to calibrate your steps to make sure you're actually walking in that direction. Let's start with setting that compass. So the very first tenet is to aim for independence. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be a lone wolf or anything. Think of it like this. You're trying to create what you could call a high entropy state. That's really just a fancy way of saying you're working to increase your available options. You want to be in a position where your choices are growing faster than your commitments. It's the difference between standing at a major intersection versus being stuck at the end of a dead-end street. You just have more places to go.
Our designer puts this into practice right away with her first major decision, where to live. She could have gotten a bigger, cheaper place way out in the suburbs, right? But that would have been a constraining choice. It would have locked her into a long commute and limited her social life. Instead, she chose a smaller, more central apartment. That was an enabling choice. It acted like a hub, a home base that multiplied our options for everything: work, friends, and just exploring the city.
Okay, so aiming for independence sounds great, but it's a huge, kind of abstract goal. And if you just stare at a goal that big, you're going to get paralyzed. You won't do anything. So how do you actually turn that massive ambition into tangible day-to-day progress? Well, that brings us to the second tenet.
And that second tenet is to work within your reach. This is all about finding what psychologists call the zone of proximal development, or ZPD for short. It's that perfect sweet spot, A challenge that's just a little bit beyond what you can do right now. But it's still achievable. It's not so hard that you give up and not so easy that you get bored. This is the absolute key to feeling like you're making progress and building momentum, instead of just feeling frustrated.
And I just love this quote because it nails the balance perfectly. Curiosity is what gives you that big, exciting destination on the horizon. But the ZPD, that's your GPS. It tells you the very next turn to make. You absolutely need both.
And this is exactly what our designer did. The huge, vague goal of become a great manager was frankly terrifying. But when she broke it down and calibrated it to her ZPD, it turned into a series of small, manageable steps. She wasn't trying to become the world's best boss overnight. She just focused on getting to know her team, one person at a time. Then, she practiced giving clear feedback. It was about building competence and confidence, one tiny win at a time.
All right, so you've got your direction, you've broken it down into steps you can actually take. So, now what? Well, the next 2 tenets are all about the engine of progress. It's about taking action and then constantly, consistently refining that action.
The third tenet is to value productive action. See, at the heart of any skill, there's what we can call the basic action. For a writer, it's actually putting words on the page. For our designer, it's creating designs. And the trap that we all fall into all the time is getting stuck in meta work. Reading about writing, organizing our tools, endlessly preparing to do the thing instead of actually doing the thing.
She caught herself doing this almost immediately. In her first week, she spent hours reading articles on management theory. And sure, it felt productive, but it wasn't the real work. So she recognized the trap, closed all those browser tabs, and focused on the basic actions, actually coaching her team members, reviewing their designs, and physically going out and exploring her new city.
But sometimes just working harder isn't the answer, is it? When you hit a wall, brute force usually doesn't work. You need precision. And that brings us to our fourth tenet: try targeted strategies.
This is about shifting from some vague intention like, I'm just going to be more organized, to really identifying the exact problem and then applying a specific tool to fix it. Now, what's really important here is the mindset. She's not making lifelong commitments, she's running experiments. To fight that feeling of disorganization, she tested a quick planning ritual. To combat the loneliness, she tried out a local meetup for sketchers. The key is that she treated these things like tools in a toolbox. She kept the ones that worked and had no problem tossing the ones that didn't.
Okay, so you've got your direction, you're taking productive action, and you're even using specific strategies to get better. But how do you stop all this great work from just falling apart after one stressful week? How do you make this whole thing sustainable? That, my friends, is where the final tenet comes in.
The fifth and final tenet is to set predictable patterns. I want you to really let this quote sink in for a second. A routine is not a cage. A routine is a commitment device. We have this tendency to see routines as boring or restrictive, but this framework argues the exact opposite. The right kind of structure is actually what enables and creates true freedom. Think about it like this. Without a pattern, every single action is like pushing a square block up a hill. It's all friction. You have to use so much willpower just to get it moving. But a good routine, it turns that block into a sphere. It dramatically lowers the friction of starting, making your positive behaviors almost automatic. Suddenly, you're not relying on willpower anymore, you're just coasting on rhythm.
Our designer built her own sustainable rhythm, and it was made up of a few really simple patterns. She had a morning anchor, just her coffee and her task list, to start the day with focus. An evening reset, a quick walk to decompress. And a little weekend nudge to make sure she tried at least one new thing. These weren't a rigid, suffocating schedule. They were grounding anchors that gave her stability in a new and chaotic world.
So, after putting all 5 of these tenets into practice, what was the result? Did it actually work? Let's check back in with our designer a few months down the road.
And here she is. 3 months later, the transformation is pretty remarkable. The city isn't a scary blank page anymore. It feels like home. She's leading our team with a quiet confidence. And it's not because she magically became the perfect manager overnight. It's because she was consistent. She just kept taking those small, calibrated steps day in and day out.
And this is where you can really see how it all clicks together into a single, coherent system. Aiming at independence gave her a solid foundation. Working within her reach made progress actually feel possible. Valuing action created momentum. Targeted strategies helped her solve specific roadblocks. And finally, those predictable patterns made the whole transformation stick. It all works together.
So now, the question really turns to you. What's the one blank page in your life right now? Maybe it's a new project, a career change, or a personal goal you've been putting off. Whatever it is, how could you start designing it with a little more intention using these 5 tenets? Where will you start?